This is a collaborative presentation. I'm Preminda Jacob, Associate Professor of Art History in the Department of Visual Arts at UMBC. I collaborated with Chang, who's the head of the IT, IT department in the library. And, but unfortunately, May had a family emergency, so she had to leave to Singapore at very short notice. But her role will be, she's coached her student, Kenneth Miner, and he will present her part as well as his presentation. And then finally, we have a student who had taken this seminar last semester. This is some of the images that you're seeing are from a seminar that was conducted in fall '09. It was a cross-listed seminar with the Honors College as well as the Visual Arts Department. And the student Benjamin Hong will present it from the student's point of view. Okay, so we'll have plenty of time for questions, but if you feel like asking a question during the presentation, it's very informal, so please go ahead. Well, the whole idea in the, first of all, I should also thank John Fritz for and OIT for making this possible. We are all excited about this experiment, and we're very glad to be able to actually have the opportunity to share our very small endeavors with you all at this early stage in the project. So thank you so much, John. And thank you all for coming. I know it's like an extremely busy time of the year. Everyone has tons of other things to do, so I'm very, very honored that you all are here to listen to us. Well, the museum seminar that has been taught for several years in the Visual Arts Department has a final research project in which the students have to come up with a concept for an exhibition, curate the exhibition, that is, they have to actually select artworks, and then they have to research some of the art and create labels and signage for them. And then they have to actually design the space and then execute it. And finally, at the end of the semester, they present their ideas, this hypothetical art show that they've created, to the rest of the group. So this is some examples of what used to happen when students would actually create it, create models of it. And this is now, okay? So here is an example of the kind of dimensions that they would have. It was oftentimes on a 3 by 3 foot plywood board. They would use foam core, paint, and the photocopies of artworks, etc., to create the images. At a few times, because I teach this in the Department of Visual Arts, I would have, maybe in the 8 years I've taught it, I've had like 3 groups who would act, and all of this is actually, this final research project is a collaborative project, usually groups of 3 students. I've had like 3 teams who have created a virtual gallery in the sense that they are imaging and research majors, animation and digital art majors. So they have had all of the expertise of digital tools in order to create an exhibition that was completely on the computer. But I never thought that that would be something that the general population would be able to do because of the learning curve. I did have a student once who was a grad student who had taken it, and she in this museums class. And later on, I've been in touch with her. Her name is Renee Shaw. You know her, Vin. And so she alerted me about Second Life. A lot of artists are getting into Second Life. This is an example of an artist called, I think it's Cao Fei. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, but she is now an up-and-coming artist. Her work was at the Venice Biennale, and she was featured in the PBS Art 21 series, showing her work in Second Life. So her entire thing is she's created this amazing fantasy environment in Second Life. Yes, it's a second. Yeah, you're going to hear about that. It's a software program, and Kenna will tell you much more about that. So anyway, so she told me about Second Life, and she said, I think this would work beautifully for your class. So why don't you think about, investigating it? I asked OIT, I asked John and Bill Shoebridge, who are my friends in the university. I asked them whether they, what they knew about Second Life, and they put me on to May Chang. They said, well, May is actually very interested in this and has been working on it in the library. So I contacted May. And actually, I just wanted to also quickly go through a few more slides and tell you that this has already been used, this as a tool is being used in the museum environment. This is a couple of slides from the National Museum of African Art in the Smithsonian Museum, where they have used this virtual environment technology because they are dealing with objects that are either extremely heavy or very fragile. So they are actually placing it in the space using the computer, and so that they can then creating the design on the computer so that they can get to see what are the site angles, etc., before actually taking the heavy objects or the fragile objects and placing them. So this is something that they created for a very recent show in 2010 that's just come down. And like you can see here, there's a huge carriage that they had to suspend from the ceiling. They had some, video playing, etc. So they had to kind of, manipulate the space. So they find this, museums are already using it.
They were doing that as a rehearsal for the real show or as a real show?
No, yeah, they were doing it as the design work for the real show. They would actually first do the floor plan, etc. Yeah, the preparation work. And then after they did it, they were also able to, send that computer package to the artist who was living in Britain. This artist lives in Britain, so he can get to see whether he's happy with the layout, etc. So it's a very economical, both in terms of time and in terms of money. So museums are already using it. My students would try to replicate that whole process of, placement, etc. But it was, as you can see here, very laborious because they have to do a lot of cutting, elaborate cutting and pasting, and making all of these objects. And these, I was showing you some of the good ones. Some of them were like not so good, and they looked. I was wondering whether this is like some sort of middle school project. I was always kind of worried as to, what am I doing? Is this really worth it? Is it worth their time that they're spending on it? I felt like we needed to have a more sophisticated means of rendering this. But I always felt that it was too much. The learning curve was too much. But now here is some example of one of the museums that people were able to create, where you are, they're both able to deal with the interior and the exterior of the museum. Here's some more examples of then. Because I want them to talk about lighting, I want them to talk about pathways, color, etc. And this is all very laboriously constructed by students in this one. This is also another image of the then museums. These are all really good ones, but and also they are large, and now they no longer exist except as photographs, of course. And these are some images of the now, where this was a group that created a science museum, and they wanted to create a snail's shell form. And so you have different views of it. You can actually not only have the museum created in 3D here, but you can actually go into the space, go and view each piece one at a time as if you're walking through, and you'll see all that.
Why do they have scuba tanks now?
Oh, that's because I think many of the students just had fun, and you're able to dress your figure in any way. Yeah. Actually, I think that's what it was. Yeah, right? It was just fun. So there's a lot of play that goes on with this. And this was an example of a then museum where, students wanted to create different levels. And so they actually had to create the board and then lift off the board to show what was going on underneath. Likewise, here there were 2 levels, and they had to, physically create 2 levels, etc. But whereas this one that they created, a group created, they were able to create a chute that seems to be, rising up, and you could actually go up on this elevator and then come up to the top of this gallery and move around the gallery, etc.
You should have a slide when you go down.
Yeah, see? So that's right. I think it's artists, this is the perfect tool for artists. So here's a then and then a now. So anyway, that was those are some of the points that I wanted to make, and I just want to now hand that over to Kenner so that he can talk to you about what May would have shared with you for this part of the presentation. Yeah. You have.
All right, so now we're actually going to be switching over to the virtual world. And a virtual world, you asked the question, is it a software program? And they're all software programs. They're kind of this online, interactive place you can go where you're this avatar, a person who you can change to be wearing a scuba tank or a bird or a giant. And you can fly around, chat with people, interact, learn things from various science museums or libraries, and just in general, waste time on the internet. That's what it is for many people. They're used in a lot of places. Academia have libraries in Second Life. Specific departments will have areas with research posted up on these places. So if you're in Russia and you want to see UMBC's science department, you can hop on here and see what's going on. So it's really interesting. And I think you want to visit the Van Gogh world? Some people have even gone to the extent of remaking pieces of art in 3D. So this is Van Gogh's, actually, Arles, and
Arles, yeah,
Arles.
Painting in Arles, yeah.
Yes. So you can actually walk around and see what he had painted in a three-dimensional view. Walk around and see the cafes and whatnot. So it's really quite interesting. And there are hundreds of these worlds. There's Second Life, there.com, Habotel, and for ours, we chose Active Worlds. We really chose this because of a cost factor. It's very cheap to use, as well as it has an easy learning curve for people who just want to get in and build and interact.
So Active Worlds is the way that you would put one of these together.
That's right. So this is, what you're looking at right now is Active Worlds.
So I keep telling people that this was done in Second Life because I feel like that's like Kleenex, it's the generic term.
It kind of is, yeah. There are a few specific differences. Second Life has areas of land split up into islands, and you can fly from island to island. Here we have actual individual worlds that are all spread out across. You can buy your own world and then build it like this. Second Life's also a little more expensive, and looks a little bit better because of that. So as part of this class, there was a lot of preparation to do. I actually taught a couple of the sessions, and I come from a computer science background, and he's from a computer engineering background, and we're teaching these honors college and art majors who haven't had experience with virtual worlds necessarily, how to build an entire project essentially for their class. And it was worth a good amount of points in their class as well. So it was kind of important that we got this across, and we had 2 or 3 one-hour sessions to do it. So it was we were a little nervous at the beginning. As part of setting it up, we had to go pick out a giant plot of land. Now, this place has been open since 1998, so there aren't a ton of giant plots of land left because people have been building and developing all over the place. So we went to one place and found a nice big plot, and our neighbor wasn't so nice. He decided that he was going to cover the entire part of our land with a giant white box so we could no longer build on there or see it. So we had to go scope out another part of land, hopefully away from anyone who is actually active and angry.
How can you be talking about finite areas of land in a virtual environment? Why isn't there why can't you just create the land?
Right, it would be, well, we didn't have the funds to buy our own world, unfortunately. So we were building in one of the public areas. So they have certain areas for people who just want to come in and build. So you pay your $5, $7 a month, and you can go and you and your friends can build a building. But if you're looking for a larger area of land, you need to find an open space where there's hopefully no neighbors around who would be bothered or who would interfere in your own work. So it's infinite if you spend money for it, but otherwise you need to deal with the rest of the public around you.
So
It's not infinite in the sense that it is running on somebody's, processors and cycles,
Right.
and they charge for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's what the land is. It's server
the whole
space.
world is generated from a processor, and somebody's got to pay for that.
Don't pay for it, that's right.
Right.
So,
Do you want to go to the library gallery?
yeah, let's go to the library gallery. As part of the preparation, when we were first investigating this as part of the library, we actually remade the library gallery it's on the first floor. When you walk in, it's on the left. So if you click on gallery, it'll take you there. And since it's a virtual world, you could do whatever you want. The gallery doesn't actually have a glass roof, but we wanted to be able to fly over the gallery and look down on top of it. So we put on a glass roof, so you can do that. And there's a presentation area, and the chairs are actually there in real life. And we have a few fake people standing around in there to make it look populated. And as well as the Mona Lisa and various other pieces of art that wouldn't necessarily be in there.
Why isn't it solar?
Why isn't it solar? We do have wind power somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think there's the windmills off to the side because we want it to be economically friendly and environmentally friendly, which is, I mean, it's all a facade. It's not actually run by any
Well,
sort of
I just
power.
wondered if that was a principle that you looked at when you were designing it.
Well, to some extent we did, but to some extent we were aiming for realism and the actual space. And so we built this as well as a three-dimensional model of what the student learning center plans looked like, which are often in a different corner. But as preparing for this class as a comp sci major, we had to look at this from when we first interacted with the virtual world. What did we learn first? What was most important? What do we know now that we wish we knew then? And how do we teach everything to these students in a couple of sessions and get them to effectively build everything? So started off saying, okay, we need to learn how to move. Okay, moving is important. You use the arrow keys to move. You use the shift key to walk through walls. You fly up and down with plus and minus. These are the important things so you can move around. And we spent an entire session saying, okay, look, you're in this world. This is the idea of the world. Fly up and down and all around, and this is what you do. And that was 1 hour. Now, for the second session, can you go to our land? Our giant plot of land. Oh, speakers are on. For the second session, we actually created an in-world tutorial. Now, this served two purposes. First off, it allowed us to very quickly cover everything that we needed to teach in the class. And then this in-world tutorial was persistent for the rest of the class, the rest of the entire project. So I think it's still there. These are what people were doing. They were practicing over in this area. So we wanted to show how to make a wall yellow or how to add lights. And so you would see create color yellow, create color green, and those are the actual commands that are being used to change the color of these objects. So by the end, we had students making hundreds and hundreds of objects because it was their first time doing it. So of various different colors, and there were flashing lights, and it was kind of all of a mess. But they were learning, and that was the important part. They were learning and they were experimenting. And we have waterfalls floating in the middle of nowhere, but that's okay because that was the intention. So this lasted from when we first taught it to them until now. So they could access it anytime they were building in the world. And if they didn't want to email a TA or wait for support, they could always just hop on here and look for the basic ideas. Now, oh yeah, another part of it, we actually built a large building that was made for holding the bulletin board projects. And these were essentially art pieces, art exhibitions that students had put together for, I guess it was another separate part of their grade.
Those were individual ones. They were kind of mini shows that students had to do individually before they worked with others in making a collaborative.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as you can see, the students did a very good job. I mean, we were very impressed with everything they could do. As far as building the museums, it was really, really impressive considering they had only gotten help from a couple of times, had 2 sessions, and they were really excited. We were all a little concerned they wouldn't actually be able to get it done because students procrastinate, and it takes a little bit of time to actually learn how to do this well and quickly. But overall, they blew us away, and that was what was really important. So I think you're going to show off.
Yeah.
Ben here is one of the students who took the class, And they built an amazing museum, and I guess you can take it from the student's perspective.
Hi, my name's Ben. So to start off with, I'll talk about kind of learning curve from my perspective. My background, I'm a psychology major. I played a lot of video games when I was a kid, so interacting in this 3D world wasn't too big of a jump for me. In terms of my group and what I saw other students deal with, I want to say actually the number one thing that I saw was not the technical difficulty, but motion sickness. Because if you stared at this for like 2 hours and then like walked away, you were dizzy, you had headaches. But for the most part, every group tended to have 1 or 2 people who were familiar enough with 3D environments that there wasn't too much of an issue. For example, one of my group members got motion sickness easily, so we would just take different sections of the museum, look at it together, she would give her input on it, and then I would go ahead and work on it. In terms of the skills required for this, as they mentioned, all the students come from various backgrounds, not all of us have IT. However, the wonderful thing about this project that I like is that no matter what your background is from, there is some skill and knowledge that you can apply to this museum. For example, one of the people in my group was really interested in policy, so she spent a lot of time designing how the program would work in terms of design of the layout and the layout of the museum and how that would work into audience interpretation. So just to kind of give you an overview, could you fly up a little bit and like move it back so they can kind of like an overview? So I built a particularly large museum. You'll notice some of the ones that Dr. Jacob showed were a little bit smaller. The name of our museum was Sabelli. That was a combination of the 3 group members, Sarah, my name's Ben, and then last one is Liz, so Sabelli. Our museum is based on a glass concept, so if you go ahead and walk in, we have giant glass elevator doors just for show. Let's see. So overall, I think like anything else, any work you get, although people are like, oh, it's a big learning curve for people who don't have IT. You know, when a professor gives you a paper on, microbiology and transcription and you have you don't know anything about it, like anything, you're going to take the time to research it and you have to put the proper time into it for you to get a good result. So for the first floor, we kind of sectioned this off under colors and to kind of teach people about pigmentation and how glass is made. And one of the troubles we had was that we wanted to actually create the 3D objects, so the glass pieces, but that was a little bit more complicated programming-wise. So we decided to just do a 4-way box of each of the images. Overall, that is kind of what we did. If you can fly up, we put like the second floor is activities, interactive activities for the audience to come in and kind of, go ahead.
So I've not taken Preminda's class, but as you're curating these museum and the objects, what's the environment or the experience that you want the visitors to have? Do you articulate that as a goal in the course, and what were you trying to create in response to that?
Right. So throughout Dr. Jacob's class, we learned various aspects in terms of curating museums. And so in addition to just designing the museum, we did have to write like an abstract and kind of a paper about what the purpose of the museum was. And so for our museum, we also wanted to have a kind of science and art fusion, except to focus more on, as I mentioned, glass pigmentation. And in some sense, like the biology that goes behind like the different chemicals you use, or what elements produce different colors using under what different settings. So it was kind of an educational. We wanted it to be for all age groups, because some of the other museums we saw were more heavy in terms of the social issues. So they dealt with like Haiti earthquakes, or they're a lot deeper. So we wanted to deal with more. We wanted to be able to appeal to like the children level, so they could come in to see the marvelous glass pieces and not have to deal too much while still learning. So for example, right here, as you can see, this would be like this piece. Down here would be like your information center. You learn about, yellow is you use magnesium. And then up here, the kids would come up and there would be like an interactive section in terms of, what was this glass piece made of? And the parents can interact with them. And there would be like a computer board. They'd be like, is it magnesium? And they would click it and be like, it's yes. And then there would be like more information. That's the general feel as to what we were designing. And then on the 3rd floor, as you can see with the tables, we decided to input like a cafe and like a gift shop. Putting in the actual glass pieces were a bit more complicated. So other than that, let's see. One reminder, there will actually be 4 student projects that will be presenting at the ERCAD on April 28th in the University Center, room 115. So feel free to stop by for that. Janet McGlynn has more information on that.
Is that your cue, Janet?
Thank you.
You can have as many of
And
these as you
one of the groups is sitting there behind, they created the dance museum. Were you able to bring that up? I don't know. Do you remember your coordinates, Frankie?
I don't have them on me.
Yeah.
I can.
Well,
You can pull it up?
I was going to say that it seems that some forms of art might be more easily represented in this kind of environment. For instance, you were saying that it was difficult to realize the actual three-dimensional glass forms. But on the other hand, something like performance art might work better, or media, because I think you can insert like a video tape, right? So that would be quite easy to present, screens of video or film, I guess. I mean, which would serve as the actual product, the actual work itself, as opposed to a representation of it, right?
Right.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I mean, at least for us, we were actually going to attempt to put in like one of our rooms was going to be a movie theater to show actual glass being made by some famous glass artists like Chihuly. However, sometimes, with us, it took a while just designing the museum as a whole. Other than that, it was pretty simple because you just uploaded it. Right, it got cut as a result of time constriction.
Can strangers show up in your museum?
Oh yeah, we actually, throughout the time we were designing, we'd have random people come in. And so as you notice, this character is UMBC Lib, but for us, we were generally agile in whatever group number we were, so agile 22, agile 21. And so people would come in and they would be like, who are all these agile people? Are they like a cult or something? Like, what's going on? And someone else would be like, oh, we're from a university, and they would come in and check it out. And
So other people right now, if we gave them your coordinates in Active World, could walk in and look at it?
oh yeah,
Would they have to be paying members of Active World?
No.
You only have to
Yeah,
pay
that's-
for your bill.
That's right, yeah.
So in fact, we could, for example, put that information out there to folks to look at in advance of ERCAD and say, come and meet the artists.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I see it like a website, how we can all go visit websites, but you can't actually tamper with it and, do anything, build anything in it unless you have you paid the money for the website and you have all of the passwords and
So
all
we're
that.
essentially in real time right now. If some stranger was walking in here, you would see him
Oh.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the person of the white box could wander over here and see what
And
you
that-
built.
Then you communicate with them like a kind of an IM type of way?
Oh, you guys took out the chat box? Yeah.
Like a IMing? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But you don't need to chat if there's no one there.
Right.
That's right.
Hello, anybody there?
So, has this been done for the new Humanities and Fine Arts building?
Has it? I don't think so.
So,
We're not in it, so.
well, I understand, but could this be a way
Yeah,
to make what we've already done better? If we took something like this, that you all now have some expertise in, that would help the rest of us move forward better, in a better way? Maybe
Well-
they've already done it, I don't
to
know.
promote
yeah.
the building, it could be used as a promotional tool.
Well,
Just
not only at
announce
least in
the
the
building.
future, you would expect your architect to bring you one of these. I don't know whether that is expected just yet of architects.
But wouldn't it be great for students in classrooms to say, this is going to be the philosophy space? How do we want to design that, get philosophers in there, designing the philosopher space and say, well,
Yeah.
while we're here, let's go look at the dance studio.
Right.
And then how can we,
That would actually be really great.
I mean, the museums are doing that, don't you think? I mean, that's what I was pointing out, the museums are doing that in a sense of, planning
Sure.
stages.
So since you're chatting, the architect could sit there on the steps, or in this case, the curator, could sit there on the steps, and people from the class could come in and ask the curator questions
Absolutely.
in active worlds.
And actually, there are some people who have mics, and so they actually talk with one another. I remember one time my speaker was on, and I walked away, and I heard like someone speaking, and I was like really creeped out because I was like, is there someone in the house? No, apparently there's a microphone feature that you can utilize here actually, so you can give like live seminars if you really wanted to.
So that's how many people do use these virtual environments, is that they, like, we did a little mini experiment even before May and I did this for the class. And like I said, it was only for a few of the sessions, so because majority of the class, they had to do a lot of other stuff, reading and writing, but this was only so, but they did an amazing job with this little bit. But some people conduct the entire class in this environment. So we had actually had, remember Renee and her partner had come to do like 5 sessions for the
Right.
on 429 course.
Right.
And at that time, they came, they were teaching the students Second Life. They came only for 1 session to UMBC. They live in Northern Virginia. And the next 4 sessions, they never came onto campus at all. They communicated with the students while they were in Northern Virginia, and the students could be in their dorms, and some of them were in the library. People like me and a few of the students who were nervous about the whole thing, we all hung out in the library, but the rest of them were all in their own dorms and all that. And then they communicated, and we all would meet, and we'd go travel to, they would say, okay, now it's time to go to this next world, we'll go visit this gallery here, do that. And
This
so,
is synchronous. So
it's all synchronous, yeah. So we're all at the same time. You say, okay, class starts at 3:50, be in Second Life at 3:50 at such and such a spot, and then you have a discussion, then you go and visit different museums, then you come back to some place, then the students had to learn how to build, and they taught them how to build, but, you know, from long distance. You know, they told them how to build little things and all that. So, but students, I found some students responded to it positively, but others felt very frustrated by the whole experience. They wanted the face-to-face interaction, and so the second time we used it for this class, we didn't use it as a, you know, creating the classroom in Second Life, which a lot of times people do. We just created it as a teaching tool to make, you know, the museum environment, just like what you suggested with the architecture, to make, you know, stuff like that. So it was more like a teaching tool. I have not yet explored the idea of like teaching the whole class in Second Life. Though there are, I think, John, you know, there are a lot of these museums, universities like some, even the Ivy Leagues and all of that, who have property in Second Life, and then they have like, you know, classroom spaces, and, you know, all the philosophy students will come and meet in that Second Life space, and then they all have their classroom, just their discussion. They don't do anything, they don't build anything, they just are there, they meet and talk and everything.
I heard that the president of Towson does that. He meets with students and people in Second Life. Have you heard that? Yeah.
Wow.
That's
I read that about a year ago. You know.
So we could have a 10th floor admin building and Freeman could throw people off the roof there?
Right? Everyone can get up there.
Yeah. Just, you know, I really appreciate what Preminda, Ben, and Kenner, and Amar have done here, because we have tried for a number of years to raise awareness about this. We brought in some speakers, we have some archives, you know, some other people who have done these kinds of things. The challenge has been and we're not alone in this, the learning curve for this, using the tools and navigating, is different. It's not your Blackboard course, and I think with good reason. You know, it is an alternate environment. I think for some classes and maybe for some disciplines, you know, we would love to see this be done more. But it's just been sort of a challenge to kind of figure out, you know, this sort of chicken and egg of what gets the critical mass going. So, you know, we were glad that Preminda and May did this. I've actually, I'm going to just go ahead and say it, I put a bug in Preminda's ear to think about designing this for a hybrid course. Maybe in an upcoming semester where we can actually get some money to do some work on this. I think it's worth trying to do that, but sometimes we end up stumbling a little bit over, not insignificant, but ill-defined, you know, parameters of, you know, who supports it, who's responsible for it, you know, those kinds of, how do you scale it up? Yeah, you know, in a lot of ways, Preminda and May have made excellent use of Active World, because at the time the price in Second Life was just too too much. On the other hand, this only works with a PC, doesn't work on a Mac. So there's some issues that, you know, you won't find out what they are until you spend some time exploring them. You know, the library's taken a lead in kind of what's been going on with the Student Learning Center. You know, this seemed like a good, you know, collaboration. I'd love to see it happen more, but it is not sort of taking over by storm in higher ed. I've been to some conferences. Bill Shoebridge, who couldn't be here, unfortunately, he sends his regrets, but the New Media Consortium has an excellent, you know, background on what's happening, not just in Second Life, but virtual worlds. Ethnographic research classes are being conducted in Second Life, where students can go out and conduct interviews in environments in real, you know, that they might not want to do in real time, different time and space. I've seen a lot of media and performance uses of spaces like this, but we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to go forward, and I'm thrilled to see what you folks have done here.
What are the realities of using this software in terms of cost? You buy it, or somebody bought it, right? And then how do you share it, and where does it reside, and how long does the license last, et cetera?
You know, I will confess that we are not the experts on this, and that's been one of the challenges, is just trying to kind of devote bandwidth, time, and finding cycles to explore all of these things. The cost for this active world space, I don't.
I
Jenna, do
think
you-
the library, can I even
Yeah,
say
this
the
is-
library, this is the library's property.
Right.
Yeah, so-
And we actually pay $70 a year, so we can have this
70?
$70 a year. Yeah.
That's for your real estate in active worlds.
In active worlds, that's
But
right.
Can I sit down at home with your permission and work in your space, or do I have to have some software?
Yes, you have to have the software, but the software is free to download.
Okay.
But you have to have an ID in order to go in and work. So I
So
have,
with your permission, I can do this from home because I'm a PC user.
Right, but you
And I could go into
probably
your
have to have a
space,
subscription.
And I could walk through your tutorial that you've left up there for
Yes.
your students.
but if you wanted to go ahead and build something, you would have to have a particular ID, and you have to pay $8 a month for that ID. So for my class of 40 students, I had to pay 2 months worth of ID things, which came to like $500 odd.
But if I wanted to just walk through your tutorial, I can do that for free as long as I know where to go.
That's right, and as long as you have the right permissions. So we can set a special key code. So you would be, if you had that key code, then you could build in a certain area.
So, as I understand what you just said, the library owns it.
Owns
This
this real
owns
estate.
this, yes.
Yeah, so that if a class in mathematics, hypothetically, wanted to use this for $8 a student a month, and a faculty person who understood it, they could, because it's
To build
property-
something, to build
Yeah,
something. If you
because
just
it's
wanted to,
property owned by the
go hang out
library.
in the
And
space.
that, therefore, we all have access, is that
If they
correct?
wanted to meet in your gallery and do differential equations, they can meet in there for free?
They can meet there.
Oh,
They can
meeting
meet.
in there
Yeah,
is
they can meet there for free.
But
Sure.
is she the gatekeeper, or is the library the gatekeeper?
Nobody is.
There's
no one-
walking in the
There's
door.
no
Yeah.
gatekeeper.
Somebody from China could walk
No,
in right now and
you
head
pay
your
for
gallery.
construction.
Website.
You
You
pay for
pay for-
construction.
yeah.
You know, the like.
Just go there.
And also, Pat, I wanted to say that, I mean, I don't know anything, I mean, I'm like completely, like I was saying, I have an avatar, but I don't even know how to clothe her, and so I think all the students have a much, you know, so I was like the teacher and the whole thing, but, you know, I was more like, you know, kind of conducting and managing and telling people, well, this looks good and that doesn't, and why don't you do this or that, but I really don't know how to build it. So, I mean, it doesn't, I mean, there, you do need to have the learning curve and be ready, be open to try and learn it, but I feel like when you have talented students, that's what I found at UMBC, I have, you know, great talented students, I use their skills and, you know, try to work with them in order to make something like this happen. I mean, otherwise it's very daunting for older faculty members to think that you have to suddenly learn this whole, you know, program, and I don't think that shouldn't be a deterrent. I'm hoping in a few years I will actually learn
Doesn't
it.
look that terrible. I mean, compared to some, it's not like 3D computer animation.
Yeah,
You know, I think this is manageable for somebody to learn this, you know.
do you think
Even
so?
you, Preminda.
I mean,
I think it's fine.
You made a lot of
You're
progress.
saying that it's hard to get people to
No,
grab on.
I don't wanna say that it's hard, I'm just saying that, first of all, I think Preminda brought a tremendous pedagogical reason to use this. First and foremost, it wasn't that, let's learn the technology for the technology's sake. She had a realistic problem she needed to solve in terms of how do you take the physical objects that were clunky, and as you said, they're no longer with us other than in photos, how do you move that into a more nimble environment? I think she did that. One of the reasons we're taping this is so that, you know, we can share this with others and, you know, have faculty think. I would rather have faculty think about how might they use something like this, not necessarily how do they use it, because, you know, we're trying to figure out ways that we could, you know, borrow talented students, create an environment, maybe with collaboration with the library on how they can use these kinds of things, but it's like anything. I mean, you know, people didn't just start out using, you know, other tools right away.
Well, if you had there was a team of student builders to help faculty, clearly one of the most time-consuming elements here is building a room like this. All the shapes, the planes, the colors, the textures, I mean, that just takes time, because that is building, you know, dealing with graphic materials. So perhaps there could be a group of students, like you know, a club of students in a way that are ready to kind of jump in and help people get to that level, you know, to help build the environment, and then you're ready to go.
From a pedagogical perspective, I'm curious, I'm glad you did the before with actual models and then the virtual. And I'm thinking of it just in terms of the brain and the brain patterns and the different things that you use in a virtual environment as opposed to the real environment. And you lose the multi-sensory piece, I think, or at least the multi-sensory piece. You don't pick up a piece of material and fold it and bend it and glue it and put it in and take it out and put it in again. I've watched these students do these. They're amazing, and they're very time-consuming, right? And
The models.
Models, right. So, from a pedagogical perspective, what do you lose in your view?
In that, by
If
losing
you
the
were
craft.
not to ask
Yeah.
students to actually create the actual model.
The actual model, well, I don't know.
Or you
I
have to take a piece of fabric and put it on the sofa.
Right, right. Well, you know, I feel like it's that the amount of time that they put into that,
Yeah.
it was not worth the fact that it was just, you know, I mean, I felt like there would be, something like this is, first of all, talking about the new generation of students who are doing more and more stuff on the web, on, you know, digital environment. I feel that this is much more useful for them in their careers also, because once they get familiar with something like this, and they go out, they can, you know, work in many different, it doesn't just have to be art history or visual art, it could be many different areas where if they have the facility, I think it would be much more applicable. The crafty thing, craft-based stuff is, you know, I guess maybe it is very beautiful to look at because there are these gorgeous miniature things which are if they are well done, but it's more, yeah, I'm not sorry, I'm not nostalgic about losing that whole trend.
Actually, on this point, I understand we're losing the multi-sensory part, and I know to see a well-crafted, model is quite incredible. One thing about this, though, that I think helps, we all know students procrastinate to the last minute. Seeing other people's museum, because you can see they're called neighboring one another, it forces the students to push themselves harder, because as opposed to like you're in your room, you're like, oh, I put this together last minute, and then you get there, you're like, oh, these are really good. Like I was actively seeing these things go up, and then what the students were doing, you're like, I gotta push harder, because otherwise, because we had to present this at the end of the class, so you're like, this is a piece of work that I'm gonna be showing that I've seen people's progress, so I know I need to step it up a level, which I think is beneficial to the student in addition as well. So.
Larry had a question.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions relating to how the overhead might be cut down for future classes. The first question on that is, can the environments be saved or pieces of it saved so that subsequent classes have less of the more basic establishment of textures and walls and such?
Actually, all the textures are available in the world. So there's actually a place called a texture yard where students just go there and all the textures are available and they say, I want this one. They copy down its name and then move to a wall and put the texture on that wall. As for things like the in-world tutorial, since we have the land, everything, even these museums will be here until we lose our subscription for whatever reason, or we delete them. Like, nothing's going away. It's all going to be there persistently.
And then they've archived, they've taken screenshots of everything, so they have like still archives of every museum.
So
and
would that save the next classes any time, the fact that it was done already? I mean, or it's just that everyone starts with the library of textures and such, just as you did?
I mean, there are also objects like that piano over there. Nobody actually made the piano.
Yeah, we didn't actually make these objects. Think of it like a big object yard where you pick and choose and you throw it in. Yeah, we didn't actually craft those things. That would take forever.
It's limiting at times because you can't actually make like your glass pieces and sculpt them. But you have this yard of 4,000 objects and you fly around to the different sections. This is walls, this is furniture, and you pick and choose what will fit for your museum. So there's always a baseline that's available. You don't actually have to do any creation of anything other than the actual architecture.
Kid, I remember that you're going to have a fifth installation at ERCAD where people can go in, and I thought I understood it to be they could try out building something.
Yes, we're going to have something set up so they can try building.
So there'll be the 4 installations that are this one, the dance one, and what are the others?
Then there's the Science Museum,
Right,
Sarah
the
Allen's
shell.
Science Museum, and I think
read
it's
it,
just
yeah.
there. And then the fourth
And the-
one is
yeah.
just Kenner.
Oh,
and-
okay,
yeah.
is your teaching
Yeah.
area.
Yes.
So they can see the displays of those 4, but then they can go sit down and use somebody's license to build something for a
That's
few
right.
minutes.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping that this is like the sexiest thing in ERCAD.
Okay.
And that room, that most people here don't know where 115 is in the University Center, that room will be packed all day long, and you'll have a whole bunch of people interested in how they might use this
Especially if
thereafter.
you have a screen showing what's happening, facing out of that window,
Yeah.
you know, to lure people in.
I like it.
I'm interested in pedagogical questions. So, what did you learn about how to teach students who are not familiar with video games? I suppose there's few and far between.
Right.
Older students. What did you learn about how to effectively teach them?
We had to be very efficient and available. Getting the teaching done quickly and doing it in a sort of iterative way. So we would go over one concept relatively quickly and then say, are there any questions? You know, it's the typical give a concept, ask for questions, give a concept, ask for questions. And hopefully fit all the information you need in the first 15 minutes. And then the rest of the time have individuals who need more help raise their hand for clarification and just kind of let them go off on their own and explore.
And they also used the library 259, where there were computers. So each team sat in front of a computer, and they were working, doing these things. And then Kenner and Amar would walk around and troubleshoot after the first 15 minutes. And also, I had to demand that the students, this was like a requirement. At one point, students said, could we please make the actual board, the real model? And I said, well, at all costs, you have to do something in Active Worlds, and if you are not able to realize it fully, then you can create a PowerPoint presentation to supplement, but you have to do something in Active Worlds. And I think Frankie and Danielle, were you hesitant about doing things in Active
yeah,
Worlds?
we were absolutely hesitant. Neither of us are big video gamers, and this world is terrifying and it's difficult to manipulate, and you can see some of our structures.
You see a guy moving like that's terrifying right there.
The structures are really difficult to put together because like you would think that you just put two pieces together and you have a 90-degree angle, but that's not the case. There's infinite possibilities, and just building a wall seems like the most challenging thing in the world. But the more we played with it, and with Kenner's help, you know, we were able to realize our vision, which was probably the most exciting part of it, is that we could do it.
Yeah, and in fact, Kenner and Amar were available all the time for them. Apart from the 3 lab sessions, I said that they could email Kenner and Amar at any time for help, or have set up individual meetings while they were building the.
That was really helpful, because I remember I met up with Kenner a couple times on the 7th floor, because I think it's still only on the 7th floor from computers. And we would meet in person to actually like go over coding, and because to be honest, generally, I mean, the objects are not as complicated once you understand, because generally you would just like right click on an object and there'll be like information about it, and then you just have to know what specifically to put in the description so that it'll show up the way you want it to. And so with their help and being able to meet up with them, and considering they were pretty much available email 24/7, it really made the process easier.
Gamers.
I don't know who to ask this of, either Preminda or Ben, but I was intrigued that you had to write up something about your project, not just build the project, in terms of what your goals were. I'm going to ask Ben.
Okay.
How were you evaluated? How was your project evaluated?
We were evaluated based on, number one, the museum concept, because you know it was something way too basic that wouldn't, how would I say, wasn't very thorough. So we had to like flesh it out, because I remember originally we just pitched, oh, we want a glass museum. It was like, that's a little too broad. So then we drilled it down, and we were like, okay, we want to focus on pigmentation of glass. And so we want to explain kind of how this museum would be set apart from other museums or that exist, because I believe there are a couple of actually glass museums out in Europe. And so we had to make, through our, kind of like a mission statement, think of it like you're writing a business proposal and you're submitting it to someone who's going to fund it. It's like, is this concept sound? Does it make sense? And if you were to gain funding for this museum, would, you know, or if you were to apply for funding, would people actually, you know, fund this, and would people actually go to it? So at least that's how I saw it. It was more of a business plan as to whether it was realistic in that sense.
It had to be just a one-page statement.
Interesting. Well, thank you. This is very interesting. And thank you for joining us as well.